Hello, Ara. How are you?
Hey, Nikos, I'm good. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Busy with courses and with papers, fighting reviewers.
So these conversations, they gave me a newfound love for traditional architecture, classical architecture. Buildings I didn't really look at much before. I have a new appreciation for them. And architects I was familiar with, but I hadn't looked that closely, like Palladio, Borromini, Bernini. I'm looking at them more and I'm really intrigued by their work. Whereas before it was just like someone who was important a few hundred years ago. I know about him, but now I'm looking at it more and I'm really appreciating the buildings, but I'm not appreciating modern architecture or contemporary architecture less. I'm still a fan of the things I didn't appreciate before architecture school. That was kind of like an acquired taste. Like I had to go through architecture school to appreciate them. I don't appreciate them less now. I just appreciate classical architecture more.
Good, but listen, I don't entirely agree with you. What would make me very happy for you is for you to study contemporary classical and traditional architects all over the world. Not only classical, not things that look like Palladio. Things that look like Chinese architecture, Islamic architecture being built today that really look beautiful in human scale. Not the fancy, iconic stuff. That's really garbage. But there are so many really good architects today who are under the radar. The journals don't publish them. They're doing wonderful human scale work using traditional spaces, ornaments, and shapes with contemporary materials that make some improvements. But the product is human. That's what's totally erased by dominant architecture. So, I would be happy if you tell me, not that you're looking at Palladio, that you're studying Nir Buras's buildings and, Leon Kriya's buildings and some of the contemporary Islamic architects,
Yeah, it's
like
true.
Kamil Khan Mumtaz in Pakistan, with wonderful buildings, today, building today with some traditional techniques plus some new modern materials, that make a big difference. It make things economical, so that people don't spend a year carving things in stone. You finish something in 2 weeks.
I'm looking at Kamil Khan Mumtaz. Yeah, that's pretty nice work. And I have noticed, oh wow, yeah, this one's beautiful. With the Islamic patterns, they are really beautiful. It's
Of
a lot of
course.
amazing sacred geometry, and that this wait, it's too bright, or that's not bright enough.
Yeah, I could not see that.
Um,
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah,
has it's really an amazing. Oh, it's because I'm right in front of the window, it's reflecting.
yeah,
But
yeah.
that type of geometry, it's really amazing. And I agree with the Chinese architecture too. It's like they embed these circles in them, and then you see like structure, like thin structure behind it that is pretty elegant and also beautiful. And then there's like sometimes the rice paper with the 2 by 1 grid.
Well, that's a
And
traditional one, but what I'm trying to tell you, and you're my friend, but what I'm trying to get recorded in these videos is that so many architects are doing wonderful work today all over the world that use the best of traditional techniques with the best of what's available today as far as materials and techniques, but they're not illustrated in the magazines. The magazines just pick the most crazy, iconic type of buildings and promote them.
did you see the new Bjarke Ingels building? It's a airport, I believe. Or is
No,
it?
I know that he's doing work in Bhutan. The government of Bhutan is
Yes,
giving
Bhutan.
him, yeah, they're giving him the whole, I think he's making a mess of it. Some things are sort of okay,
Have you
but
seen
he
the
was
here?
the, I
It's
know. Yeah, I've seen that. He was the wrong person to get the commission.
there is ornament in the diagonal structure, and it's kind of an interesting looking building.
It,
The structure is expressed on the roof that overhangs,
I
and
have seen renderings of much of the stuff that he's designing for Bhutan, but I think he was the wrong choice. for
Oh, there's an
Bhutan
interior.
because he's coming from a modernist megalomaniac approach to architecture, and he's making compromises, trying to make things a little bit beautiful. Yeah, I know that. I know that.
Um, it has the ceiling is vaulted. You see that it's not like a regular modernist typical flat ceiling, and then there's a lot of ornament in the structure, in the diagonal structure.
Yeah, but look, Ara, you're not listening to me. I'm
Yeah,
saying that he's coming from preconceived, gigantic notions of modernism, and he's adapting by putting in some human element. I would have preferred the other way around to get somebody who really understands traditional architecture and doesn't, is not coming from modernism and is adapting a little bit to human scale. So what Bjarke Ingels is showing in Bhutan is 1,000 times better than he would have done, say, in Denmark, in his native Denmark. But it's still it is an adaptation, partial adaptation to the human scale. It's not a complete adaptation because it did not arise from the human scale. They could have picked a better architect who came from the human scale, from the tradition, rather than to come from modernism and adapt, because it's not going to be a complete adaptation.
so you think the stuff he did in Denmark is bad?
All the stuff I have seen of his around the world is just applying the modernist form language. To me, it lacks the human scale. It lacks empathy. It is industrial modernism.
There's the
It's not. It's
project
wait,
where
wait.
he.
It's
Oh,
not.
sorry.
It's not ugly, but it is not. It is not empathetic either. It's sort of neutral and it's still gigantic. So to me, it is of no particular interest.
But when you think a lot of the world has a housing crisis, and he does these project, he designs these projects where you fit like 150 housing units in one development, and it's kind of staggered, so they all get light and ventilation. I mean, it's not. I don't know. He's not my favorite architect either, but I think he has some good designs.
Let me go back. Let me go back to what we said in the beginning of today's video. I have 50 architects who work in traditional styles who could have made a much more human, much more appealing, much more empathetic buildings to house 250 housing units. Okay, Bjarke Ingels, I don't find his solutions appealing. They are still dominated by the modernist approach to design, which I find not appealing.
One time you sent me an email, I was looking at the people CC'd on it. There was someone CC. I looked at his website. He had a bunch of really nice work. Was his name Michael? Oh,
There's Michael Mahaffey, he's the urbanist. Michael Imber, traditional architect, wonderful work.
I think Michael Ember.
Yeah,
Michael
yeah.
I,
He
Ember.
does. His specialty is country homes, for fairly wealthy clients. But he also does groups of buildings, school campuses.
Yeah, it was Michael Ember. His work is very
It's
nice.
it's
It's
gorgeous. It's gorgeous.
yeah.
He's based in San Antonio
It's
here. He's my friend. It's gorgeous work.
um this project, this Moosehead Lake. This is really beautiful.
Yeah, that's all beautiful. Yeah.
Um yeah, I mean it's oh this one, this Butcher Ranch. It's a very nice building. Um
Okay, so let me yell at you.
yeah.
Just like occasionally I mention an architect you never heard of. So I just told you I know at least 50 people around the world who could build social housing solutions that are much more human than what you refer to. Yeah. Okay, but these people are not known. These
That's
people
true,
are
they're
not
not.
known. The press keeps pushing the same star architects who I think are less qualified to build human scale buildings, whether it is for social housing or university campuses. or even a business building.
What do you think about shell structures? Have you seen like there's those some buildings where it's not quite articulated at small scale, but the overall form of it looks like it's working with gravity. It's like when you take a piece of paper, it wants to fall down like this, but then you fold it and it stays. And there are buildings like the ones designed by Pierre, Luigi Nervi, or Felix Candela that they have those principles where you see the shell of the roof
I don't
and it's
like them.
folding in
I
the
don't
roof.
like them. Look, I think it's a tectonic trick. You are using materials, but you're not adapting the material structure to human use. You're forcing humans to use something that is a material structure that is neat. Okay, so those are neat material structures, but you're not adapting those to human use. You're building something and you say, well, the users are going to have to use that space that I designed. So there's no adaptation there. And the other architects, including you, get excited because they see something, that's neat tectonically. Yeah, but
Yeah,
that does not adapt to human use.
yeah. When you see a roof that comes halfway and then it folds down and it becomes the wall, and you see the curve, gradual curve, and then the part where it folds up and becomes the roof, there's like a glass curtain wall right there. It's just that subtle curve where it's just kind of bending and becoming more rigid and supporting
Well,
the roof.
for
It's
people
nice.
like you who have gone through architecture school, that is really exciting. But for people like me, who will I will ask, will I enjoy using that building? And I was saying, no, it's a cheap trick. I would not like to work in that building or use it or walk by the building every day. No, it's a one-time trick. Does it help if there are offices inside the building? Sitting in that office? No, it doesn't help.
And these conversations are really making me think a lot. I remember before I
Good.
started architecture school, I visited the campus of the school I went to. I
Yeah.
was 17 years old and I looked at the buildings. I went to the new building. There was a new building for the architecture school. They had about three buildings and there was a new one. And I looked at the building and I was like, this is an architecture school, but the architecture isn't really nice. I don't know if I want to go here. But I kind of went back to the campus and I did like it and I liked the faculty that I met and I decided to go to school there. And then a few years later, I really loved the building because I noticed it did have a brick facade. And sometimes the bricks, like every eight bricks, had like a little bend in it and a little like angle cut in it. And I started to notice these subtle things. And then on the inside, the HVAC was exposed and the lighting was, they didn't have a drop ceiling. And I looked up. And then over time, I started to appreciate the building. But you're right. At first, I didn't. I had to spend time with it and then eventually come to like that type of architecture.
Which kind of architecture was this?
We don't
Modern,
know.
postmodern, contemporary with like an exposed ceiling on the interior, industrial look with
Yeah.
a brick exterior.
Look, it could be very unpleasant, very inhuman. We don't have a picture to see, but let me remind you of Solzhenitsyn's novels. Somebody gets arrested, they get sent to a prison camp in Siberia, and they don't like it. After a few years, they get used to it. So you can get used to many things.
Let me show you guys the building.
It doesn't mean that it's good for you.
Is there a picture of the building? So when I first visited the undergrad architecture school that I went to, oh, it was this building that I wasn't a fan of it at first, but then eventually this is the new architecture school building
Oh
at
my God.
Woodbury.
Yeah, it looks terrible.
When you look at these bricks closely, every few bricks there's like a variation. I don't know if you could tell. You
That's
can't
a
tell from this
cheap
image.
trick. That's a cheap trick. It's not fractal, okay? It is to draw your attention from the fact that it's not fractal.
Actually, yeah, you're right. The nice, probably the nicest building on the campus are the nicer buildings on the campus are the older ones that were built like in the
That's
1800s. Yeah.
invariably the case.
That's
Invariably.
1920s or 30s.
Oh, maybe it was, yeah, 1920s.
In the 1800s, all you had there was beans,
Oh, okay.
bean fields.
Oh, yeah, you taught at Woodbury at one point, didn't you, Nir?
Yeah. It was a fun experience.
you were teaching studio?
Yeah. What else can I teach?
There are also like seminars.
Yeah, too much work. It's easier to go around than just yell at students.
Critique their designs.
Which is what the studio is. It's an exercise in bullying totalitarianism. It doesn't teach the
No,
student
I
anything.
never, actually, I never yelled at students. I would spend, when I was teaching first year, I would spend about 20 hours a week in the studio, just holding their hands individually, all of them, just going from one to the other. And it's a responsibility, especially the way it's taught. You see, the way it's taught modernly, it's really throwing the poor kids to the wolves. So there's a responsibility there that most teachers don't get. When you're teaching traditionally, they can learn it one from the other. You as a teacher really only come in basically to fine tune their sensibilities or their experience, or show them something that they um, didn't quite get. If you want to see something, relatively new, I can share with you our ongoing work in. We're in the process of producing renderings on a number of projects.
Yeah, please do. I think the audience will enjoy that. But while you are finding that, let me come in with a historical comment. Now, Nir does not particularly like Christopher Alexander, but Christopher Alexander.
It's not that I
Hey,
don't like
wait!
Christopher Alexander.
Don't
You have to be
interrupt me.
accurate, at least be accurate with regard to my own
Don't interrupt me,
sensibilities.
Nir.
I think that he's inadequate. That's what I think.
Don't interrupt me, Nir, please. Well, Christopher Alexander hated studios. He said this is the worst possible way to teach students, and he had fights with his colleagues because he refused to be a juror for the studios, and that's all they did in Berkeley, studios all the time. And Christopher would say, this is a horrible way of being sadistic to students. Because he would see all the other faculty, just bullying the students. So Christopher said, this is not a way to teach students. And he refused to participate, and he got into a lot of trouble. Oh, this is gorgeous, Nir.
Thank you very much for saying that. We are once again, we're actually completely breaking tradition in some ways. Obviously using computers for drafting and modeling purposes. But what we're producing here is, I think I showed you already some other images from the same. I think you already saw this last week, maybe.
Yeah.
And then you saw this, and then we have this. This is our little. These are just beginning images. This is just the massing models. This is what a traditional massing model looks like. It comes complete with detail because the mass in and of itself is meaningless. It's all about the experience. So we drew elevations of the buildings. We drew the elevations of the buildings from templates, and we created the templates by tracing source buildings, literally tracing photographs. Why? Because there are 8 types of proportion evident in this image and any architectural piece. And these different proportions, each one of them is a statistical fractal. So you need to have that many fractals running around. It's not about fractality alone. It's about having a variety of fractals simultaneously. That is how art imitates nature. So when you're looking at this, your brain is processing this as a nice landscape, perhaps, in the same manner and giving you equal satisfaction. So by the time we get to a mass of something, it is fully detailed down to the window frames and you know, obviously are all of the architectural pieces, because there is no architecture without detailing. The detail is the architecture. It was a modernist who said God is in the detail.
Yeah, no, wait. All the scales contribute, and if they're harmonious, they create the whole thing from the smallest detail right up to the largest scale
So
of the building.
how do you guarantee that they will be harmonious? What's your method?
You don't guarantee. You go mathematically. I go mathematically, and I ensure that all the symmetries connect with each other. You go
When you say that
intuitively.
they connect with each other, what do you exactly mean by that?
That means that the symmetry can be transferred and it concords with what's next to it and what's on a bigger scale and what's at a slightly distance.
That's
And
a
you,
nice analysis. But how do I, as an architect, use that know-how? Or do I need to use another method to actually design something like this? Because we didn't go for mathematics at all.
I will explain.
I'm asking.
I will explain how you do it because I know how you do it. You have trained yourself to sketch with these mathematical principles unconsciously. So you do it according to intuition and it comes out beautiful.
Actually, that's 100% not true.
Okay, so you tell us how you do it.
Yes, this is based on what you, as a mathematician, can identify post factum as a mathematical relationship. I'm working within an architectural relationship. And the architectural relationship is based on architectural literacy, including a firm grasp of the orders, which are the only method today identified as providing a guaranteed result. I don't care about innovation. I care about experience, and I want a guaranteed experience. So when I am tracing a structure, I am actually putting lines in where the original architect is already expressing the 8 types of proportion that we have. Number 1, proportion of equality, 1-to-1 proportion. That's symmetry, bilateral symmetry. And you can see here an infinity of bilateral symmetries. We have, can you see the picture? Yeah, I still see a picture, right?
Yeah. I see your project here.
Number 2 is differentiation of large versus small. Differentiation. And you can see here that there is a differentiation, for example, between the bottom part and the next part, which is roughly golden section. A differentiation, large to small, and that is how we use the golden section, primarily because it's simple and easy to use, but also all of the series, all of the geometric series tend to that. Number 3 is punctuation. And you can see here punctuative proportions, which are roughly between 1/5 and 1/7. We don't care for rational numbers, obviously. And so you can see here a proportion of roughly 1/7 of this distance, or if you want another proportion, could be this to that. That's roughly 1/5 or 1/6. And you also have this proportion, this punctuative proportion. And you can see that in every one of these, it can go up to here, it can go up to here. That's roughly 1/5. In this direction, that's roughly, or actually exactly That's 1/7.
I don't know what to attribute it to, but have you guys noticed that if you ask maybe like the five most prominent architects alive, like the most well-known, the most talked about in the media, they will say something like the classical orders are bad. They,
Yes, that is from Corbusier. That's
yeah,
from
they'll
the
say
Charter of
it
Athens.
it represents a time that we're not in currently. It's another time. We're in a different time. We need to do something at the time, and the classical orders are bad. Like I've heard a couple
Yes,
architects
yes,
actually
they
say that.
actually believe that. And that comes from Corbusier in the Charter of Athens. Yeah, you're welcome to read it. Then we have other very specific and important proportional relationships that represent the hand of the artist. Any style you see that you can identify, whether it's a personal style, a regional style, or an epical, a time style, a chronological style, is what we call a shape grammar. And shape grammars, Steiny and Knight, you've heard of them, I know, Salingaros.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Um, it took me a few years to understand what they were saying, because it was so not designy, ostensibly. But what they're saying is that a style is simply a set of shapes and the rules that govern how they go together. So they analyzed a whole bunch of styles.
Steinian Knight?
Yes, Stiny.
No, Steeny and Gibbs, I think.
Gibbs, yes.
Yeah.
That was, yeah, Steiny and Knight used to be married and they would teach shape grammars. And then she went into color grammars, which is very interesting also. Almost did my PhD with them.
Okay, have you finished, Nir?
Almost finished. I see you want to get going from off of this.
Yeah, yeah.
So the idea of shape grammars, which is a mathematical idea based on the notion that the language of critique is the same as the language of creation, actually opens the door for designers to do better work, and it also underpins the other kinds of proportions that we are observing, or open the door to seeing them. A personal artist, Michelangelo versus Bernini, a locational Italian versus German, and an epical Greek versus Roman versus neoclassical. So we have 7 proportions there. Then there's another type of proportion, and that is the that you can either extend something or squish it, like in cartoons, but still recognize what it is. So there is something proportional that is constant in that. I don't know if you have a term for that in mathematics.
Yeah, it's a homomorphism.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, there's an 8th type of proportion that we left open. We don't know what it is because we think we might still discover another kind of. And these are tools that you can actually use as a designer. Our language is entirely within the studio design work. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nir. Thank you for this very nice exposition. However, you confused Ara because you prefaced this by saying your approach is totally different to my approach, whereas in fact it's very close. It is looking for the mathematical symmetries in order to create coherence on a large scale. You're using a different language and different vocabulary, but it's the same approach in order to get large scale coherence with beautiful small scale symmetry that links to the large scale coherence. So thank
The
you for giving
no,
the
we are actually, the content of both of what we're saying is largely the same, but
yes.
the purpose is different.
Okay, but
Our purpose is to convey to other people how to design. Your purpose is to understand a relationship, but you do not set out. We do not set out. We look at these things grosso modo. We look at an order as a holistic whole, which we can then modify however we want. And
Yeah, but look,
you don't recognize the orders as necessary.
Nir, your statement that your approach is different to my approach is misleading because it's not. There are differences in the vocabulary and the explanation, but the aim is the same. So thank you for that. Now I want to go back to a remark that Ara made because we need to clear it up. Ara said that the 25 most famous architects today hate what you do and hate what I try to do. And they declare that it should not be done today. Okay, now who chose those famous architects? These people are chosen by a corrupt system that awards the architects of inhuman buildings, and they lap it up because they make a lot of money. They become very famous. They produce questionable work. In some cases, it is sadistically horrible work, and they get prizes for it. So it's in their interest to try to destroy anything else that could compete with them. You know, these are not honest people. They constantly attack what our friends produce,
I
whether
want
it is traditional classical architecture or Chinese architecture or Islamic architecture or a resurgence of Art Nouveau or Art Deco. The reigning star architects will try to destroy everything because they want to be in power, and their product is deficient. So this is a product. This is a corrupt society that keeps the same corrupt people on top.
I want to point out a secondary benefit to the types of buildings that you both talk about that I realized recently. So the building that Nir just showed and the buildings that both of you show as good examples, they have a thermal mass. It's not all glass. There's a mass that will act as an insulator that will be even more energy efficient because a lot of contemporary architects like to talk about energy efficiency. But if that was a blank glass facade, if what Nir just showed, if that same mass was just done with like a curtain wall all around, it would be way less energy efficient. That type of design that has that articulation of the mass between the glass, it really acts as a solid thermal barrier and
Well,
the
you are
insulation.
correct, Ara. Now, my other friend, Michael Mahaffey, and I have published 3 or 4 articles and a whole book on how the sustainability and energy efficiency of modernist buildings is a total scam.
Yeah.
They're 5% energy efficient, whereas the traditional buildings are up to 95% energy efficient. Okay? There is a total misconception, and the press goes along with it and just sprouts lies.
Actually, now we have numbers, and we know
Yes?
that modernist architecture and construction contributes over 40% of global warming. And if you add to that 15% of the cars running away from modernist environments to suburbia, then you have it's over 50% is the concrete, the steel, the air conditioning, the cooling, the heating, all that stuff. You're both right. Traditional architecture is durable and sustainable, and the whole idea. There are 2 questions already that Ara has raised. One is the glass. Why the infatuation with glass? And number 2, why the hatred for the classical orders?
So we
And
gave partial examples.
both of these are 19th century romantic ideas. The glass thing emerged in the late 19th century. There was this crazy man called Scheerbart. I mean, he was ganz Meshuggah. He really, really was. He
Yeah.
was Majnun from here, till the cows come home. He invented a perpetuum mobile. He wrote feminist pieces, and he believed in the religion of glass, that colored glass would save the world.
Right. And the German glass industry adopted him and promoted him in order to sell their product.
In 1914, the glass pavilion, the artichoke, Glass loves perpetual motion. Yeah, yeah. Look at the artichoke. So the guy I wrote um, my PhD about was an intern, was a student of Bruno Taut. Bruno
Yeah,
Taut
yeah,
designed that.
yeah,
Bruno Taut was he was a good guy. I never knew he was Jewish until recently. Um, he was a good guy. Yeah, I
yeah.
mean,
So,
look at that.
so why did he go along with this horrible manipulation by the German glass industry?
It was very, I think that the idea of the glass industry pushing the product, that wasn't the major drive for him. I think that they were all looking for something else or something else to believe in. I believe that the Beaux-Arts method really went bankrupt after 1870. Yeah, after 1870, there was sort of a bankruptcy of the Ecole method. And if you actually read, and I have some of them here, the books regarding how to design by American authors who had been to the Ecole, what they are telling you how to design is very personal, uses a lot of nomenclature that's like, where they get that terminology? And it really came from the Ecole method. Ecole method, they had some classes in common. Most importantly, the drawing, the watercoloring, the sculpting. They learned how to sculpt. They learned how to do all that stuff. But
They called it Beaux-Arts.
yeah,
Yeah, in Paris.
Beaux-Arts.
Beaux-Arts.
But um, the actual design study wasn't held in the school. It was held in the actual studios of the teachers. So each teacher had their class, their kids, and the guys from the U.S., men and women, and Julia Morgan was the first woman
Yes,
graduate.
yes,
Julia Morgan from California was the first
yeah.
woman graduate of the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. Um, they One of the professors taught all the Americans. Apparently, he spoke English, and he taught all the Americans. I forget his name, had an L in it somewhere. And McKim White went there, and Carrere and Hastings, and
Louis Sullivan went to the Beaux-Arts also.
Louis Sullivan.
Yeah,
He was, yeah, same time,
yeah,
roughly,
yeah.
a little younger. Anyways, so the Beaux-Arts became very personal and eclectic. There was they had all this architecture, all these architectural forms at hand, and the search for novelty that was driven by the perceived technological progress, which was increasing in significance, had them, they wanted to see something else. They wanted to see something new,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and there was a sense of developing, and there was a difference between developing styles, which is in the material world, and raising consciousness, which is an individual effort and really is about uplifting. So there was a conflation of what it meant, what novelty meant. So I think that the École des Beaux-Arts failed as a method at that time towards its end.
Okay, okay. I want to make
Go ahead,
a related remark to
please.
Ara. Ara, the greatest woman architect for 1 century, American woman architect, Julia Morgan, is totally buried, okay, because she practiced beautiful architecture, okay, traditional architecture, innovative architecture, Art Nouveau architecture, Art Deco architecture. She's erased from the list of great architects, a woman architect. And today, the AIA keeps shouting, we're promoting woman architecture. Why don't you? Fantastic architect, Julia Morgan. So why is she buried? Because she created beautiful buildings. and the regime today wants to just erase those beautiful buildings.
Wow.
This is a crime against American architectural history. The fact that Julia Morgan is not recognized.
This is really nice.
Yeah, absolutely
That's
gorgeous.
the pool at Hearst Castle,
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
other.
Oh, she designed that?
Yeah, Hearst Castle, all of Hearst Castle, and many, many other wonderful things. And she's unknown to architecture students.
I didn't realize that. Back in the 80s, we all celebrated Julia Morgan because we were being trained to be postmodernists and we were looking at those guys. So so we looked at her work and appreciated it, and she was so disappointed in her life. Oh gosh,
Well,
that
her
before
own
she died,
country.
at some point, she never married. And then when she was, I don't know, late in life, at the very end of her life, she closed her office. She burnt all of her drawings,
Really?
closed her office, got into bed, and for 6 months lay there facing the wall and died.
Good God, good God.
She had one trip out. Her niece took her somewhere in the middle. She was really, really disappointed. She, together with, what's the name of the
Who?
great
Who?
architect from Berkeley?
Who? Christopher
Mhm.
Alexander. Oh,
Oh, another
Please,
architect from Berkeley.
please.
Bernard Maybeck.
Maybeck, thank you.
Yes.
Maybeck and she
Yeah.
invented California mission style for the
Yeah.
1896 Chicago World Exposition.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So,
So
so
she was
she was there at the
betrayed.
formation. So when she drew
Yes.
for Hearst, I think in Los Angeles,
Yeah.
I believe it was in Los Angeles, the Hearst building in LA was a Spanish Revival building, mission style building. She invented the style.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then George Washington Smith, really great architect, worked in Santa Barbara. Um, you really want to take the AIA guidebooks and look at anything built before World War II. It'll just fucking blow you away. Excuse my language. By the way, the American Academy of Film, that's on Wilshire and Fairfax, it's a Mendelssohnian building par excellence, Erich Mendelsohn. And we would visit it every single weekend. My mom would go shopping. I was maybe 8 or 9, and my dad and I would wait in the car, and he'd tell me war stories from World War II. But that building is a remarkable building, and it has some of the most amazing, beautiful responses to retail and climate.
What's the name of this Eric Mendelsohn building?
It's at the corner of Fairfax and Wilshire. Right now it's the American Film Institute.
So should we get into anti-Semitism in American architecture? And
Actually, I
how?
didn't finish telling why, if you want. Anti-Semitism, yeah, sure. As a matter of fact, the dean of Woodbury,
At what time?
a former dean, forget it, a former dean of USC architecture, was working for Welton Beckett in the 60s. So the story he told me, was working for Welton Beckett in the 60s, like 62, 63. Big firm in LA, Welton Beckett. And he was working over, he was working during the break, during lunch, and Welton Beckett was walking a client around in the studio, showing him stuff. And the client looked at this guy, later the dean at USC, and said, "I don't want guys like him working on my job." The former dean was Jewish. That's 1962. You would have thought that anti-Semitism was over. My encounter with anti-Semitism was in 1980 when I arrived at Stanford. My dad was working there, and the first Rosh Hashanah, a car goes careening around the corner of the Hillel Synagogue where we were, and guys lifting their fists and saying, Heil Hitler.
Really?
And I'm thinking, how little are your dicks? Um, but anti-Semitism
No,
never stopped.
I was going to just mention one thing to Ara that he may not know, because you mentioned this a building by Erich Mendelsohn. Erich Mendelsohn came to the U.S. after trying to work in England and in Israel, and he came to the U.S. And the number one power broker in the US, the founder of the American Nazi Party, Philip Johnson, gave orders. Don't give Erich Mendelsohn any commission because he's a Jew. And Erich Mendelsohn just did tiny jobs here and there. The greatest European architect of his era was reduced to doing tiny little jobs.
He
Wait,
was
wait,
a
didn't
recognized leader of the modern movement in Berlin.
didn't Philip Johnson give some commissions to Frank Gehry?
Yes, he did.
Actually,
And
Philip Johnson, after the war, he drew for the state of Israel their first nuclear reactor for
so he
free.
wasn't so Philip Johnson was not an anti-Semite.
It was
He started
100%.
out, he started out as a
100%.
virulent anti-Semite, and
Yeah.
when it didn't suit him, I want to think good of him.
Good,
I
good.
think that
You have a
he
good
was,
heart. You have a good heart.
I think that of the architects, he's the one who paid lip service the least to modernism. He tried everything and he did it on his own dime. And he really didn't give a shit about anything. So he did some projects which are absolutely magnificent, including in
Oh, the tower?
Nah,
which
Wait. Oh,
that's cheap. No, no, the Dumbarton
no.
Oaks
Oh,
Museum is very
he did
good.
the AT&T Tower,
yeah, they
which
changed it.
actually has a remarkable lobby and ground, it touches
Yeah,
the
yeah.
ground in a remarkable way.
That's the best thing.
And an
But
interesting cap at the top.
no, no,
Not
that's
so
silly.
interesting
That's
for a
silly. That's silly.
classicist, but what the hell, it's postmodernist.
But the Dumbarton Oaks Museum is pretty nice.
The Dumbarton Oaks Museum is typical of some of his work from the 60s. Um, what I appreciated most was the Crystal Cathedral. That's something that we ought to see here. Have you been to it?
I have
Oh,
not.
it's
No.
still up? I
It's
thought that had
not
been
up.
torn
Yeah, yeah,
down.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. No, but don't forget what I said. He sabotaged Felix Mendelssohn's
Oh,
career in the U.S. I've never
yeah, I
forgiven
have
for
been to
that.
that Philip Johnson building actually. Yeah, it's in California somewhere.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It started out as a giant congregational Christian church.
Did,
It's a not congregational, it was a drive-in church of Schuler.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Drive-in church.
It was a drive-in church,
Yeah, for a huge
and
number of people.
yes, and um, I just want to get a good image of it, of the interior. It is extraordinary on the inside.
yeah, it is nice.
It's extraordinary. This looks back at one of the corners,
Uh-huh.
and that's the organ loft in there. What I want you to know about it, it's a glass building and it has no air conditioning. It
What?
is comfortable year round. It is a brilliant piece of architecture. It's a glass building without being a greenhouse. All of the windows are operable.
Uh-huh.
Wow, that's amazing.
That is worth the Nobel Prize in architecture. Nobody talks about it.
No, but he created the Pritzker Prize so he can award the first one to himself. This guy was a big
That's funny.
operator.
He was a big operator,
Uh,
and I went to visit him, and I never met him. It was already when he was on his way out.
Oh,
If
that's
you
a
look at
shame.
his glass, the glass pavilion,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
you understand that this is where's his.
Oh, the one that's a copy. That's a copy of the Farnsworth
It's
House.
no.
Oh, not
First
that
of
one. That
all,
one's a really bad building.
you
No,
can't
no,
copy the
uh,
Farnsworth house
Yeah.
no.
um,
This is
because there's nowhere to go with it. But this is Johnson's. Actually, was an extraordinary piece.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah, this one.
I looked to me. I thought it was like a copy of the Farnsworth House, but I
No,
think the Farnsworth
no.
House looks
yeah.
nice. This
Okay,
one.
so yeah, that's Johnson's building. Yeah,
You have to understand what it's for. This is a pleasure pavilion.
yeah. It's a
It's
one-off.
it's a and underneath behind here, you don't see it in the pictures. Actually, he sits on a first floor. This is the fucking room, and below that are the other rooms. No, this is for
Mm,
real.
mm,
The other rooms of the house
mm.
has bedrooms and bathrooms and all kinds of other stuff.
Oh, there's a basement?
It's not a basement, it's a first floor. Except it's, well, call it a basement. Yeah. Sorry. There is another um, floor here, and of course they never show it because it's not you'll see here in the pictures, you can't find it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah,
insane.
I didn't
He
know there was
showed
something
what he
underneath.
wanted,
yeah.
you know,
Never
he
seen.
revealed when to hold them, when to show them, fold them, you know,
Well,
that kind of.
I have a story about Philip Johnson. I know somebody in New York City who knew him quite well. So I asked him, was he really a incarnation of evil? And this guy said, no, no, Nikos, I know you don't like Philip Johnson, but it's a shame you didn't meet him alive. You would have loved him. He was so intelligent and witty and knowledgeable and funny. The total opposite of these idiots who pretend to be architects today. You would have really enjoyed talking to him. So it's a shame.
He's known as a guy who helped a lot of younger architects by getting them commissions, which he had at the time. Like he helped out like a bunch of younger people coming up who there
Young
aren't a lot of figures like that
architects
these
he
days.
slept with, or he
Yes,
gave them or he gave them he was the kingmaker.
yes.
He made Robert A.M. Stern, but Robert A.M. Stern married Colgate. That's how he got where he got.
Ah, ah, mm,
Always, it's always, listen, who's your community?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. You have the Greek community in Texas, you have the Armenian community in Glendale, and I've got the Jewish community in Portland with no clients. Okay. So it really, I can't find a photograph of the lower floor of this thing. It's really astounding. You just don't have it. And this is, this already, the internet already publishes only what got published before, so you won't see anything useful. But I want to go back, if not now, then next time, to the why modernists hate the classical.
Yeah, I'm curious about that too.
So it all started in 1750. Around that time, there was the exploration of the sublime versus the beautiful, the pain-based aesthetic experience. What is different from the pleasure-based aesthetic experience that all of design had been predicated on prior? And they said, okay, pain-based experience. And they started identifying the possibilities for that. And at that time also, together with that exploration, came the resurgence or the reimagining of Gothic architecture. Gothic architecture is a fabulous and amazing practice, full of stuff that you wouldn't even begin to imagine. I mean, it's above standard classical in terms of the mathematics of it and all kinds of other things.
There was
How
a guy, Viollet
difficult.
Leduc, right, who brought back Gothic. It was a Gothic revival.
No, he was at the end of that cycle.
Oh,
Beginning of it was Horace Walpole in England. And that's about the 1750s. He built Strawberry Hill, and then there was Fonthill Abbey. There were a few attempts at new Gothic. So neo-medievalism came back as a possibility. And together with the industrial sensibility, the romantic sensibility, all of them it happened 1800 is like a date, is like a fulcral date. Although nothing happened in 1800, it's a fulcral date. People started a cycle throughout the 19th century. The cycle was every 20 years. You had a few years of Neo-Greek, a few years of neoclassical, and a few years of neo-medieval. And the purists wanted neo-Greek, originality, blah, blah, blah. And that coincided with the Greek War of Independence, 1820. So it was like on people's brains. You can do only so much with Greek architecture because it is so fine. It is the ultimate in beauty. So you don't need the ultimate in beauty all the time. You really want to have more variety in your town. You need stuff, but the method gives you a full-blown city pretty much. So then you had the neoclassical stuff, and after, 10 years later, the whippersnappers, they feel, oh my God, all we're doing is copying the orders. We need something else. Let's have neo-medieval. Together, the neo-medieval also came with the arrival of the romantic nationalist notion that there were sources of architecture different from the Latin, primitive Italians. We don't want them. We're sophisticated Germans and French, and we want another source story to our nations. Medieval.
Nir, yeah, please summarize because we're over
So you
time.
had these cycles: neoclassical, neo-Greek, neoclassical, neo-medieval, but there was one more thing attached to the neo-medieval. The guy who wrote the book on it, Pugin, he was a Catholic in England, and he wrote that true Christian architecture is neo-medieval. So it took on a political tone from seeking out national origin and a religious tone seeking out true Christian architecture.
Okay, but Ara wanted to know why modernists hate traditional architecture.
These neo-medievalists like Ruskin and like Pugin and like others hated the classical. They hated it because it wasn't their style preference. At the end of the day, it was a matter of a style preference. They put it down in ways that are intolerable. So towards the end of the century, you had, Viollet-le-Duc was in 1850s, 60s doing his work, and they all came with this agenda. The neo-medievalists became, at the end of the 19th century, the Romantic expressionists.
Is the word classical synonymous with Greco-Roman?
Yeah.
The Greco-Roman architecture? Okay.
The orders are Greco-Roman.
Yeah.
At the end of the 19th century, you had the Romantic expressionists, including Scheerbart and Taut, and some of the Art Nouveau people and some of the craftsman people, and they were expressionistic. Some of that expression came out in like Mendelsohn in the early 1900s, but they were Romantic expressionists, and they had all the stuff, architecture of its time and form follows function and all these slogans. They were the people who invented all these slogans and carried them with them. People were fundamentally working in traditional modes all the way until World War I. After World War I, Germany was kaput. The war ended in 1918. It wasn't until 1923, 5 years later, that there was money to start building housing in Berlin. And the Berlin government was socialist, and their friends were the young architects, all of them students of the Romantic Expressionists. And they went from traditional modes overnight. It was in April 1923 when they started designing the workers' housing projects. They realized they couldn't do it traditionally, or they weren't good enough to do it traditionally. And so they invented Neue Sachlichkeit, the new rationalism, taking all of the verbiage of the Romantic Expressionist with them. And that's how the Romantic Expressionist way of thinking is what is used in modernism, although it doesn't belong there. And the hatred for the classical that Ruskin had got carried by them in their mother's milk. They were neo-medievalists who became Romantic Expressionists and then Neue Sachlichkeit. That's how the thing passed by.
Good. Okay.
Thank you.
You finished, Nir. Thank you so much for an excellent historical analysis. Now, I have a very different analysis of 20 seconds.
Please, and I'm sorry I talk so much. You shouldn't have me
This is important for our listeners because it was a very nice, and I agree, a very nice historical analysis. For people don't know that. Now, I have a independent 20-second explanation of the same phenomenon. The modernist architects were just ruthless individualists who wanted commissions, so they just destroyed everything else that wasn't their own boxy concrete and glass cubes. That's all. And the press took up on this and went along with this. So, it was to their benefit to destroy the center of cities and wonderful old buildings so they can get commissions to build garbage, glass and concrete garbage. So, that's a 20-second explanation. These are people who don't care about humankind, who don't care about cities, who don't care about the human users.
They don't ask questions. They don't question what they learned from their teachers. They accept it as truth, and they don't question it. You are an outlier, Mr. Ovsepian, because you ask questions. They don't have answers for you, and that lack of answers puts on you a tag of being retrograde somehow or other. I'm sorry, you're a retard, like Professor Salingaros and me.
Okay, can we wrap up this session?
Yes, the future of modernism is classical. There's no question.
Whoa.
Okay, and on that ambiguous note, I thank
I'm
everybody.
waiting for Frank Gehry for his final structure to be a Greek temple verbatim.
We'll see.
If he's really serious about his work and his path during his life, he's bound to do that.
Okay, we'll see. Time will prove us true or not. Okay, anything to say, Ara?
No.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.